Hello and
Sure.
welcome everyone to this episode of Mind Explorations. And today we have John Scanlon working with deep trauma and FND is the title. FND is Functional Neurological Disorder. It's something that we hear of more and more nowadays. So I'm very, very curious to hear more about it. So here's John for you. And welcome, John. So
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be back. Yes, uh, FND is something I started working with about 3 years ago.
good. But
About 3 years
first,
ago,
I
I'd say.
want you to introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry. Right, I feel
Yeah, go ahead
absolutely
and introduce
reprimanded.
yourself, John, first of all. Do you want to
Right.
start again? Do we
Okay.
want
So
to
my
start
name is
again?
John Scanlon.
There we
I
go.
forget half the time this feels like a chat, so you just
I
actually,
know.
forget that you need to do that. I am a hypnotherapist. I'm based in Ireland. I have been working with deep trauma and FND now for a number of years. Most of what I deal with is anxiety, depression, mind-body connection. Most of what I deal with. So much so that even today, one of the clients said, I want to give you a review, but I'm not talking about what you were telling me, what we did. So it's like you don't get too many of those kind of reviews. But
Mm.
I also set up the Irish Hypnotherapy Conference then 2.5 years ago. So we are just finished year three. And yeah, it's been a very successful venture. It's been great. And it allows me to do this, my job, which is what I love to do. I love working with people who want to learn, and I love working with clients. Like there's nothing more rewarding than when a client who's had a seizure on a continuous basis or has some physical or emotional issue, which they can't get relief from anywhere else, and then suddenly they're walking out the door with a smile on their face. You just can't beat that with for love nor money.
Yeah.
Um, and initially, like FND is one of those that people are discovering more and more. It's becoming more common to be talked about. About 20% of neurology diagnosis now are coming down as FND.
Right.
Um, and I'll do a whole presentation, but very briefly, about 20% of visits of diagnosis are FND, and there's very little support. There's almost minuscule. In the way that I look at FND, one of the things I suppose I've come to the conclusion of, and I can't scientifically prove it, but yet I can prove it in my therapy room, is that once I deal with the trauma, a lot of the conditions for FND start to clear.
Yeah.
All right. Medically, people will tell you that trauma may be a factor, and that also anxiety is an issue and it causes reoccurrence and makes the symptoms worse and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So, but in pretty much most of the cases that I've dealt with, and I deal with a number of them each week now at this stage, there's always some trauma based. But and you have to remember, trauma is what people perceive it to be.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody losing a teddy bear may be traumatic, depends on the time, the circumstance, the meaning, everything that happened. It doesn't have to be something serious.
Mm.
In that moment, it is, and I mean life threatening or whatever. So, if it's all right, what I'll do is I'll run through a presentation,
Hmm.
and then time allowing, we can see what time remains and then see if
Wonderful.
demonstration might work or something.
Yeah.
It's fairly deep because one of the things that one of the and I'll deal with it as I go through it. So I'm going to share the screen now if that is
Hmm.
all right.
That's
Because there's one
fine.
distinction that I do want to make, which let me find where I'm supposed to be. Bear with me for half a second.
That's fine.
Um, there's one distinction which isn't that, which, well, I don't know if people make it as clearly as I'm about to make it here today. Um, there we go. That's what I wanted. Um, right. So apologies now.
Hmm. I'll just read out some of the chat. We have audience as well here in case, well, you can't see it on the replay. So I had a 13-year-old who had FND and couldn't get out of bed and go to school. So this is something that happens with FND a lot, isn't it, John? It's kind
Yeah, I mean, I've dealt with a lot of teenagers who have it. It what was the condition or what was the underlying circumstance?
a 13-year-old who had FND and couldn't get out of bed and go to school.
Literally just didn't have the physical energy to get out, or
She had lost her mom, it said, the next
okay,
comment. So there
okay.
would be the trauma component likely.
That is trauma component, yeah. Yeah. Because it manifests in a number of different ways. Now I'm literally I've finally got myself ready. It was like paralyzed. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've dealt with a number of different people. I had one lady who couldn't walk. She would literally crawl around the house, but yet could drive. And on occasion, when she got out of the car, she'd run
Mhm.
until she remembered she had FND, and then she'd stop and fall.
Right.
Really strange. It's those mind body connections. They're really, really strange. And there's nothing logical to it, which means it's really hard to try and understand. So in the way that I deal with this, I'm kind of dealing with it as almost like changing the environment. So it's almost like if you take like a gardening exercise, you're weeding the garden.
Hmm.
You're getting rid of all of the underlying circumstances, and then what you're doing is rebuilding.
Yeah.
You're empowering and then rebuilding as we go. Um, I've had chats with a few people, Frederick Mao at the conference in Dublin, who works a lot, and he wouldn't necessarily agree that trauma is a huge factor, is always the factor. Sorry, he knows it's
Mhm.
there,
Yeah.
but in most of the cases that I've dealt with, it genuinely is. And once we clear that, but one of the things that I want to do is I want people to understand there's such an array of tools that we use, and all of us know most of those tools, but it's
Mhm.
knowing when and where and how to use them.
Yeah.
And that really is the key to it all. Now, I've developed a lot of my own, I've tweaked a lot of other people's, and I've made my own stuff as I've gone, but um, it's all just based on the practical experience in the therapy room.
Yeah.
Pretty simple. It's um, so what I want to talk to today about is trauma, FND, and then hypnosis as the pathway to reconnection, particularly in the case of FND. But I will connect them because they are very important.
Hmm.
And there's many similarities between them that need to be addressed.
Yeah.
So, in general, a trauma, in general terms, it's a distressing experience that somebody negatively impacts a person's mental and emotional well-being. It can be a single event or it can be a whole series of events that they perceive is harmful or threatening, and it's their perception of it.
Yeah.
So, this is a standard definition. It can lead to a range of symptoms, including anxiety, fear, difficulty regulating emotions, and even physical symptoms. Now, it goes way beyond headaches and
Yeah.
nausea.
Yeah.
It goes way beyond in the deep stuff.
Hmm.
How it affects the nervous system, which is a key part, because you'll understand why in a moment. Um, Traumatic experience significantly disrupt the nervous system physiologically and psychologically. And they can manifest as hyperarousal, dysregulation of the nervous system, of stress response, alterations in brain structure and function, which is where we need your neuroplasticity then as we go through, ultimately impacting mood and overall well-being. What in the case of FND, in the case of FND, the nervous system has become overloaded, and I will get to that.
Yeah.
So one of the first questions I ask any client who walks in the door is, do you feel safe? Most of the time, the answer to that is no.
Hmm.
So that's the difference when I talk about rapport and safety, because we're always talking about rapport and the connection with the client. And it's almost like in the graphs or the images there would show it to you. It's almost like rapport is shaking someone's hand, welcome, they feel safe in that room. Um, but it's about them feeling safe in general.
Hmm.
So the blanket, the fire is meant to represent that feeling of just them feeling safe for themselves. All right. And that's part of the job is to help them to create that feeling of safety within themselves.
Hmm.
Because rapport doesn't work properly And hence the number of sessions will also depend on the safety levels that they need.
Yeah. No, I know this from Tinnis's work as well. You
Yeah.
know,
You'll find there's quite a few similarities.
yeah, yeah.
Four trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So you just see them. We're all familiar with fight, flight, freeze. We've probably heard them a million times. The one that's probably less well known is fawn, which is to appease, to please, to pacify, just to avoid harm, to smile, and to, that can lead to people pleasing, burnout, and difficulty setting boundaries later on. These are all feelings of feeling unsafe in the nervous system later on. Again, it mightn't appear like somebody has anything major going on, and you mightn't see it when they're in front of you, but it's when they're not there that they're sensing it. One of the biggest things that you learn is to read people, particularly when they're sitting in the therapy room.
Yeah.
I think we all understand that. The link between trauma and FND. Trauma, especially chronic or early life, overwhelms the system. It just overwhelms the nervous system. And the nervous system adapts by staying in fight, flight, or freeze mode. But on the continued going on of that, as that just continues to develop, the system does overload and it needs to burst out somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it can burst out psychologically. It can also burst out physiologically. And when it bursts out physiologically, it then bursts out psychologically. And it needs to be cleared in both ways. FND, I tend to view FND as a misfire between the brain and the body. There is nothing wrong in a brain scan. There is nothing wrong in a physical body scan, but yet the system doesn't work. So it's how to address that.
Mm-hmm. Which,
I
there you
use,
go.
sorry.
I was just gonna ask. Yeah, go ahead.
What is it? It's a disruption in the brain body communication. There's no structural brain damage. I tend to see it as like the Wi-Fi signal from the brain, the body's not picking it up. The other way of looking at it is, the brain is telling the body to do something, and the body is responding differently. It's just picking up a different. The prediction is wrong. But either way, what is happening here is that it is manifesting in seizures, in dizziness, in not being able to walk, hearing's been affected, speech is affected. There's multiple ways. I've had people coming to me. My very first client had 6 non-epileptic seizures every single day.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Every single day. And she would literally wear a lanyard around her neck when she went out to say, I'm not an epileptic. And I'm not an addict. Her son was with her explaining that to people often.
Yeah.
But within 3 sessions, all her seizures stopped. I mean, it was pretty mind blowing for me. And that's kind of, I suppose, what really got me into this in the first place was. And then as we go through it, the other thing that we realize as we go through it is that there's very little support. So what are the symptoms of FND? Seizures, movement problems, cognitive difficulties, dizziness and balance issues, speech disturbance, and sensory changes. And if you imagine that you're sitting there right now and that you try and get up and walk and you can't, and someone tells you, well, we don't know what's wrong, but you're not going to be able to walk again. What do you do?
Now that's a big suggestion, isn't it? You're not going to be able to walk again. Whoa. What are you going to
They
do?
might
Yeah.
frame it exactly like that, but they're telling you we don't have a solution for you. We do
Yeah.
not know what's wrong.
Yeah.
Like, what's going to happen? The reason that you might get something, well, what's going to happen is you're going to get anxious. They'll
Stress.
medicate
Yeah.
the anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
You may get depressed if that keeps on going. The risk factors for FND, the ones that are listed: neurological history, trauma history, mental health conditions, family history, gender differences. It's more common in females actually than in males. It's about 60-40, I think, is the figures.
Right.
But for me, the ones that I've worked with all the time, it's normally been trauma. And once we clear the trauma, everything works to a
Mm-hmm.
large degree. There's a whole reset has to take place. But when you go through that, the medical conditions, so you've been told that you can't walk in and you can't drive and you suddenly lost your freedom. Um, what people will medicate is the underlying conditions. They'll medicate the actual manifesting conditions. They give
Mm.
you tablets for anxiety and
Yeah.
they'll recommend you do physiotherapy or psychotherapy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very common with those kinds of disorders. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Clients, because it's new, clients just feel dismissed. They don't they don't feel heard. And the fact that there is no treatment for it makes it even more like it just seems like a never-ending issue for people. It's never going
Yeah.
to be resolved. Um, and when people go down the psychotherapy route and the physiotherapy route, they're not addressing the emotional coding that's underneath.
Mm. They're
And
coping,
that's where,
teaching coping and management skills, right?
correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's all they're being taught. There's no addressing of the underlying conditions. So as long as and that's largely because they haven't formally recognized that those conditions exist.
Yeah. Can you explain the term emotional coding for anyone who doesn't know what that is?
Emotional coding is any event is any event that happens. So I'll give you an example.
Mhm.
And this is an example I give to my clients all the time. Um, and I use a lot of examples from my own life, for instance, but this is one. I happen to be a Manchester United supporter, which at this time is not a very pleasant thing to be. My friend is a Liverpool supporter, which at this time is a very nice thing to be.
Mhm.
And even if you don't know much about football, you'll know that those two just can't stand each other.
Mm.
And a couple of years ago, Liverpool played United and they won 7-0, and we happened to watch the game together. Now, that was not a very pleasant experience for me, and it was a really pleasant experience for him.
Yeah.
But we both saw the same game,
Yeah.
right? So I coded it differently than he did.
So your perception and experiences decide what it is that you're going to feel emotionally.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And that's basically when I'm talking about emotional coding, it's perception. It's how we perceive something and how we take it on, what meaning it has for us, because everything at the end of the day is meaning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people look at the same events and they just get two different meanings. So much of that is our perception filters that we look at the world through. And it's when we look at the world through those eyes that we kind of the first thing that we're trying to do is change it. And if you like, that becomes part of the safety protocol, is just literally trying to change the perception that people have.
Yeah.
Um, Often I say things like, for instance, I'll repeat the date both formally in pre-talk and afterwards in hypnosis many times. And I literally just say it is the 4th of June 2025. Everything before today is over. You can't go back to it even if you can. Even if you could, you can't. So when you're dealing with someone whose trauma is in the past, now if it's ongoing, that's different. If they're living it right now, that's different. But most of it tends to be past stuff related.
Mm-hmm.
So you're giving the mind permission to let go.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You're just giving the mind on many different occasions. And I use a lot of disassociation as I go through it.
Right.
And in that disassociation, the mind just gets the ability to release stuff continuously. All right.
Yeah.
So much of what it is the pre-talk and so much of the information that they need in a very general way. And I like to keep things simple. Helps them just to clear it. They don't necessarily need to know the theory. As far as they're concerned, they want to be able to drive. They want to be able to walk out the door. They want to be able to, whatever it is.
How much do you have to
So
tell your clients about the theory or about the functioning of or the non-functioning that lies
most
behind
of
it?
them, most not as much as you might think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do slag myself quite a bit. Now I'm a man, so therefore I'm immediately simple, right? So, but the I like to keep things simple. So
Mm-hmm.
actually, I find that the Wi-Fi metaphor, because most of these people have been to neurologists, they've had all the detailed stuff that they've got from neurologists and doctors. What they're actually looking for is something that works.
Yeah.
And when they come to me, they get someone who understands both what the issue is and at the same time how it's affecting them.
Yes.
So ultimately, it's the empathy that comes with it that allows the change to happen. That's that feeling of safety has to come
Yeah.
through a feeling of empathy that is created, which is part of the rapport skill, but it's very significant in this part. It's just massive in any
Yeah.
kind of trauma work that we're doing.
Yeah. Rapport is not
Um,
automatically trust, is it? So they need to trust you to be
Absolutely
able to help them before they
correct,
even go for you. Yeah.
correct.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I do. I mean, that first session, the first one is always there's a very long pre-talk. There's a very long explanation that goes behind it, but it is designed that it gives them the freedom both to know that they understand it, but more importantly, that I'm in a position to help them because I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you will find at times is that people will come and they won't necessarily believe in hypnotherapy, but they found that this guy's magic, he's got great results. And then suddenly, when they're being asked to look at things in a different way, they're going, well, I'm not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that so it takes a while. I mean, I think I had a doctor's wife who had FND, and, you know, she made certain amount of progress, but it was like, no, it's not. I don't have trauma. No, right?
Ah.
It was just that, and no, I'm not letting that go. No, I'm not that much, you know. So it was, and that's a key part to this is to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
But there's all kinds of tools as we go through this to help people let that go. Some are indirect and some are direct.
Mm-hmm.
All
How many
right.
sessions do
Um,
do you have? Do you have a set number of sessions? Because you were talking about the first session, or is it just
with
depend?
FND, it's normally somewhere in the region of about six, but it just depends. It really, really, really does depend.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's different.
Yeah.
Um, it's been done in three or four. It's been done in six or seven. It
Mm-hmm.
really does depend. But the other side then is that people stress can re-trigger stuff.
Yeah.
So like there's kind of an ongoing maintenance piece that they're just advised to do. It's up to them. Most of them will, if they ever feel stressed, they'll book it in. I think it was, you know, I can't remember who actually gave me the metaphor, but it was a client that they had, and it was like they were finished after six sessions. They were like, no, 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 I'll see you again in a couple of months. No, you don't need to. No, no, I'll see you in a few months. No, you don't need to.
Yeah.
Look, I get my hair done every month. I get my
That's true. Yeah.
annual medical visit. Why can't I get my mental health checked? You know, but it's that same thing. It's about making sure that um, people mind themselves and take care of, because life happens. Again, that's part of the explanation. Life happens, and I will often use the metaphor of the pressure cooker. You know,
Yeah.
anyone who's used emotional detox will understand that. And it's about keeping that pressure cooker clean and
Mm-hmm.
as empty as possible, because that's ultimately the thing that is the trigger that sets everything off. It just represents their nervous system in a way, but it is just a metaphor for change.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And yeah, so I've already mentioned that 20% of neurology diagnosis are FND now, and that's probably rising. Um, there is research on hypnosis,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it was after six or eight sessions of hypnosis, people had a 75% full or near full recovery
From FND.
um, from FND, yeah.
Okay.
All
Wonderful.
right.
Do
And
we?
87% showed significantly clinical improvement.
Mm-hmm.
They're fairly significant numbers by any standard.
They are. Yeah, definitely. Do we know why 20% of new neurology diagnoses are FND? Did you say that number has gone up?
I expect it has. They're kind of last year's kind of figures. Now I need to double check what they are today, but
Right.
they were coming out of the US. Um, there's more and more. It'd be higher. It probably, I don't know about Europe, but definitely in Ireland and Britain, I imagine it's higher because FNDs, most medics don't even know what it is.
Right. Would you have any idea if it has gone up, why that would be? Is it just because it's being more diagnosed because as functional
That's
neurological
possible.
disorder instead of
That's
we don't know what it
absolutely
is?
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You think
absolutely possible.
awareness? Mm-hmm.
Awareness creates, it's like anything, the more we focus on something, the more people see it.
Mm-hmm.
It does become a catch-all for where they can't understand anything.
Yeah.
And I had a client last week, and she had seizures. They paused for a couple of days. She was with the neurologist. They haven't given her a formal diagnosis yet. I know what the diagnosis is, but I also know that she's done 3 sessions and it's pretty much cleared.
Right. Wow. Okay, so symptoms that people come to you with, so they range from seizures to being unable to walk, being unable to do what?
I go back
We did have
to
that, didn't
there.
we?
Yeah. So everything from seizures to walking issues to remembrance issues. I'm dealing with
So how?
someone at the
Yeah.
moment who is having both absent seizures and also has memory issues.
So,
Absent seizures is where they just literally drop, which there's a
mhm,
physical, you can damage yourself physically, you can bang your shoulder,
yeah,
anything can happen to you because you've no memory. Dizziness, where people are literally, that mightn't seem that much, but if your ability to drive is affected,
yeah, yeah,
that's fairly significant. Speech, obviously, and sensory, so touch. People are just, they get reactions when they touch things. It's like,
reactions.
again, I haven't come across too much of those. It's
Mhm.
mainly been the seizures, the cognitive, and the dizziness have been the
Right.
ones that I have seen. Mainly seizures, to be fair.
And what kind of
Um,
movement problems? Being unable to walk? So I wanted to go a bit more.
Unable to walk. I've had one person who
Yeah,
just literally crawled around the house, but yet could drive the car.
yeah.
You know, and the one thing that I say to people continuously is that this is not logical. So don't try and
Mm,
logic it, because how come you can drive and even walk when you get out of the car, but you have to crawl around the house? There's
mm.
nothing logical.
Well, that's how I see why Frederick Mao says it's not all trauma, because then he would expect that there's a connection between cognitive and the yeah movement
Yeah.
areas of the brain to make it simple. Okay, I have a question here for you. Do you know, John, if there's any link between FND and inflammation?
You're going to find inflammation that has is a role in pretty much every disease that exists.
Yes.
They don't know that if that's the answer. They don't know is the answer to that. Um, no, I haven't read anywhere specific that inflammation has a role to play. I imagine it has. I imagine it has. But see, the problem is they can't actually tell you where the malfunction happens.
Yeah,
So it's a really tough one to answer.
right.
Um, to be fair, to be fair, there is an awful lot of. I'm not going to say. I'm not going to say. There's such a lack of understanding of what this is that trying to get specific information like that is really difficult to get. In time, they'll probably know the answers as we go, but right now, it's just not there.
Mm.
Um,
I'm just reading
so
here that inflammation research in FND remains in its early stages. So that, yeah, basically they don't know yet.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but inflammation is
Um,
one of the things. Stress causes inflammation, so that is quite, in my opinion, anyway. But I'm not a doctor.
it's
That's
quite, and most of what I'm looking to deal with, like I described it, is clear the garden. Literally clear the garden. So when you do that, you're going to reduce inflammation anyway.
yeah.
If you're using parts work as part of this, you could well be working with the immune system as part of that. I do that.
Mm,
There's a lot of metaphor of health. There's a lot of reconnection. But I'll go through that as we continue.
hmm
Um, So why does hypnotherapy work? Okay. Well, if you can drive and walk even momentarily, or even in the short term, but yet you have to crawl around the house, there's nothing logical in that. And I think every hypnotherapist knows that most of the issues that in the unconscious mind are not logical because that first experience is magnified, is held on to, is expanded. Um, I think like I always find, and again, this is something when I speak to any of the clients, I just give them one particular example of somebody I had who had a fear of spiders. And literally, because these are great ones to explain how what happens in the unconscious is not logical.
Hmm.
That person was living in Australia. They were from Ireland. They had a fear of spiders, professional, successful, saw a spider on the wall one night, knew while it was big, it wasn't dangerous.
Yeah.
But within 1 hour, bags were packed, an airline ticket was bought,
Oh, wow.
and came home. Now, they took them a day or two to leave the job. Obviously, they had to notice and all that stuff. But their decision was literally made in an hour and their bags were packed and ready to go. They wanted to go back.
Mm.
Um, when they were three, their grandmother had a panic attack in the kitchen when she saw a spider.
Right.
As soon as that spider issue was addressed, I was getting videos of them chasing spiders around the garden. That was the decision. So a 3-year-old made a decision that day to leave Australia. And so when I talk about that, I'm letting the client know that you try and logic this and you're just going down a road of you're not going to understand it.
Yeah.
It's a true story actually. It did happen, and it was one of my clients. But it's kind of like it allows them the freedom to trust as well and to just go with that process,
Mm.
which is a big part of it. Um, the other thing that I do is because I'm default assuming that trauma is involved, I will use a lot of imagery. I will use a lot of disassociation rather than have people have to relive trauma,
Mm.
pure and simple.
Yeah.
If they don't need to, I don't want to try. I will go there if I need to. I do use regression if needs be, but only if needs be. And often they've buried it anyway, they don't know what it is.
Hmm. Right.
Um, but hypnotherapy allows us to do a lot of that and allows us to tap into neuroplasticity then because when you take out the negative emotion and can start to replace it with visualization for what the way it should be, you allow neuroplasticity to take place. But the negative emotion is the thing that keeps it locked in place for now, and you've got to get that out of the way first.
Mm. I have a
So,
question here. Oh, yeah. Finish. Go ahead.
yeah,
Okay. I have
question?
another question. Yeah. What's the difference with an epileptic seizure?
And non-epileptic?
Non-epileptic and epileptic seizures, I guess that's about.
Um, Epilepsy, they can diagnose that fully in the brain. They know the part of the brain that happens and that causes it. Non-epileptic looks like an epileptic seizure, but there is no epilepsy.
Hmm.
That really is the answer to that.
Hope that answered. Yeah. Okay.
They don't
Um,
have epilepsy, but it looks the exact same.
right. I have no, a comment. There was a suggestion that functional tremor are often diagnosed as essential tremor, familial unknown cause, quite likely incorrectly a lot of the time. Does that make sense to you? Okay.
Yes, it does. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, that's one of those body movements that just happens, and people go, oh, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong. Why are you trembling? There's nothing wrong. It's just, it's a different form. I mean, how come this manifests as dizziness on one hand and non-epileptic seizures on the other? Like, so it's all basically, it is a huge catch-all phrase for when there's nothing wrong in the body or nothing wrong in the mind or in the brain, but it's still not working properly.
Yeah.
So you're going to get every catch-all in between. What I do is I treat it over as many sessions as needs be. Um, but I treat it in a way that allows people to safely let go, to in a disassociated way as much as possible,
Hmm.
to forgive and let go of the anger that they're holding, normally to a person, but even to an event or even to a disease. It's to let that stuff go because that is all part. And once that's done, um, there is a reconnection process. There's one very important message that needs to go through to the client, though, which is that our understanding of trauma is its job is to protect us and keep us safe. That's what we basically always believe trauma is. Um, but it's not doing its job now because if safety is health, it needs a body to live in, and the body's been affected by that. So you're basically reframing the unconscious intent. You're telling it to change its role.
Hmm.
It's about permission to let go.
Yeah.
That's one of the key messages that needs to get through before somebody will release.
Mm. So,
Because
mhm.
as you go through this, there'll be the general release of normal everyday stuff that people have, just the general stuff that most clients who will come with emotional baggage of some kind. And after that becomes the underlying conditions that are causing this, the underlying emotional conditions that are causing this.
Hmm. Right. Okay. So your therapeutic approach. I'm interested in hearing that.
Okay, sorry, I thought there was a question. Okay,
Nope.
so what is it? The pre-talk is absolutely key to everything. It builds that emotional safety. I'll keep use the word safety over and over and over again.
Mm.
And they have to feel safe to change. They have to feel safe to let go, and they have to feel safe to trust. The very first step is about establishing emotional safety. And that takes time, depending on the client. But for a lot of clients, time at that is absolutely key. But once that's established, the change becomes fairly rapid.
Hmm.
Okay. I use huge amounts. In anything that I do, I use normally about 3 levels of disassociation, and at every level, they're letting go of something.
Hmm.
Every single level. So I use, and these are adapted. I would have picked them up from people. I've just adapted and then to make my own way of them. Even if I teach, emotional detox and a kinetic shift, I actually use a slightly different form of it myself in my own therapy room now. Slightly different. The But I use Freddie Jacquin's like psychological decapitation. So it's a model where you're coming from 10 down to 1 and 1 to 10 all at the same time. One is relaxing, the other is letting go. And it also creates confusion. I've adjusted that quite a lot for the way I work. So that's almost the first step that I use in terms of disassociation. The second is an emotional detox. And the third would be something, it could be the arrow, it could be grey room, it could be it could be a few other different variations. These are ones most people will know.
Hmm.
Again, tweaked and changed for what it is that I'm looking to do. And it becomes actually a therapeutic framework that I can adjust for pretty much anything, no matter what you come in with.
Yeah.
I'll use that same kind of approach. It's understanding the reasons why I'm using it. And once I do that, why the reasons why they're there, I can actually frame this approach for pretty much anything that I'm using, anything at all.
Mm.
Um, the I tend to develop things like in trance, clearing a pressure cooker and emptying it and plugging it in and having it as an auto clean function every night as they sleep. I use a computer an awful lot for parts work where they delete programs and reinstall. Um, One of the big ones is a process called anger release forgiveness, which is taking the emotion. If there's often you'll find people are involved in the cause of their trauma.
Hmm.
So explaining that forgiveness is nothing to do with the other person. It's got to do with the fact that they're carrying stuff around with them 24/7. Even though the event is over, and I go back to it's the 4th of June 2025 again, the event is over, they're holding on to this memory, they're holding on to its effects, and in that, forgiving that other person is not about that other person. They may never have to see them again if they don't want.
Mm-hmm.
Often it can be literally anger, releasing anger at the condition. It doesn't
Right.
matter. You can have a picture of a condition in front of it
Mm.
and just letting it let go. Every time you're going to find that that pressure cooker just starts to go down and down and down. And if nothing else, everybody will tell you and everybody will be in agreement that stress will exaggerate the conditions. All
Yeah.
right. So when people have whatever symptom they're getting from this, stress will magnify it. It will make those symptoms appear worse, right? So by emptying that pressure cooker, you're actually increasing their capacity to handle stress anyway. So even if you're not curing the underlying conditions, what you're doing is you're stopping the things from continuing to manifest on a continuous basis.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Um, it's then permission for the unconscious to heal. That's key to that. And that's key. It's both in the pre-talk, it comes back in here. It's a bit like, and it's as I said, if the unconscious's job is to protect and keep you safe, but your body is now not feeling safe and you're living in your body, then that role needs to be changed. That role needs to be changed. I use a huge amount of metaphor. I would tend to tell people in 3 or 4 different ways that, they don't, things like it's holding on to the lesson from an event, but letting the emotion go. And I
Mm-hmm.
use 3 or 4 different metaphors for that. One might be a big, huge warehouse where you've all those big, huge boxes that are filled. But actually, when you go into it, it's mainly stuffing. There's a picture at the end of it. Get rid of the box. You've just let the emotion go. People understand that. It just helps them just to put context in their own head.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it's about reconnecting. All the way through, there'll be many different ways to reconnect. Um, because I do that pretty much when we take anything, I'll always put stuff back in. Um, and the reconnection can be, I will use things like, for instance, I will get someone to go through a mist. They're very disassociated at this stage. They're in really deep trance, but they would go through a mist. And that mist, let's say, is perfect health. It's the blueprint for absolute perfect health.
Mm-hmm.
And as they go through it to the count of 5 with it doubling in intensity every single number, their mind is now starting to figure out how it works. Because I'm not a neurologist. The neurologist can't tell them how it works. I'm not a neurologist, but what I am doing is I'm giving them a metaphor to change on the basis that the unconscious knows what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That happens many, many times. It happens when I'm doing the emotional detox. It happens if I'm doing an arrow. It happens if I'm doing pretty much anything at all. Um, and it just allows the mind body to reconnect. I'll also use parts therapy quite a lot, either in physical parts or in treating it like a computer program and getting the mind to release all the negative programs that it's holding on to, download the latest versions, which are really the original versions.
Right.
And what I normally do is there's 2 last things that I and I only do this when people are ready to do it, because if I try to do this early on, occasionally I will, but I know people will be back to me within a day or two going, is this normal? I feel, right? What I do is a thing called, it's a little star journey. And the little star journey is literally where they connect. Again, deep in trance, everything takes place deep in trance at this level, where they connect with the spark that's about to become them.
Mm-hmm.
That spark that's about to come down doesn't have confidence issues, doesn't have FND, doesn't have, right? And then it's about walking through the journey of life with that little spark, knowing that they've always been safe, they've always been loved, always been supported. until they come all the way back to today, and then looking at the future in a new way. And then the last way is, I call it a lighthouse. It's basically using the logical levels model to clear old patterns and to reconnect with that little star and then install new patterns in identity, values, beliefs, behaviors, and subsequently the environment. Because if you try and change people's behaviors, and physical response is a behavior, if you try and change that, but at an identity level, they believe something else, then you're always fighting a losing battle.
So this approach is, oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
This approach is over about 5 to 6 sessions normally.
No, it's always the same structure as you just said, because it all built on one another, right?
It depends. Yes. So basically, in any session with FND, I will always use any kind of trauma I work with. I will always use disassociation because I'm in that. There's always a letting go. It's not that I'm just disassociating for the sake of disassociating. There is always release in each and every step. And obviously, the more that they get down into that level of disassociation, the more that they're releasing, the unconscious is getting the message. Oh, he's not asking me just to do it once. He's not asking me to do it twice. Oh, he's asking me to do it a third time. Ah, Jesus, I'm letting this stuff go. All right. And it just starts to do that itself automatically. And then there's things like the anger release protocol may be used in one session. It may need to go back and revisit it again. It depends on someone's life and what the issues that they're facing are. But in most cases, I am working with parts or with anger forgiveness policies and with reconnection. The little star journey is normally kind of session 4 kind of take by the time, but I'll only do it when I know someone's ready to do it.
Right.
Because otherwise they're reliving trauma again. And yes, if they haven't got rid of a particular memory or a particular emotion about a person or a thing, then I'll go back and I'll do the regression type.
So that's a last resort kind of thing, regression.
Pardon me?
That's a last resort kind of thing, but it's like only for especially difficult cases.
Because we don't need to do it. We just don't need to do it. And if you're dealing with people with FND or deep trauma, they don't want to have to go back and relive this. They've already lived it. That's why they're holding on to it. It's looking at it from a case of helping them to do it as easily as possible. And when they do that little star journey, they do get to go through all that, but they get through it not desensitized, but it's almost like it's now, the way I'll describe it to them is when I'm doing the pre-talk, I will describe to them that when you do the whole model of the mind and, the left and right hemispheres and the left hemisphere is kicking off, that when that happens, it's like there's a movie going on in their mind. One of those movies that when you walk into a room, it completely takes your attention. If someone else walks in, you wouldn't even know they're there. Yeah. Well, that's what's happening. Our job is not to change the fact that happened. It's to make it a black and white photograph on the wall. So that if somebody calls it, you go, yeah. It just eases that flow. So you now don't do that. You just do that. Right. Changing the fact. I'm not going to tell them it's something to be grateful for, because that's probably a stretch too far. And it's not something they should be grateful for, but it's something that's over. It's something that doesn't hold emotional charge. Yeah. Even things like talking to them about a box and the box is full of padding. The padding's the emotion. They get that metaphor as we go through this. There's about 4 or 5 different ways I do that continuously. And it's just that, I suppose, over the last number of years, working with so much of it, that I've everybody's different. So there's a whole toolbox there that you need or that you use just depending on that client and what it is that they need. Yeah. But I've also discovered that this works then pretty much across anything. I can use it for anything. Anything. I mainly get the anxiety stuff, though, anxiety related stuff, anxiety and medical. They're the kind of stuff that I get. And adoption. I don't necessarily get early childhood trauma. I don't get much of the smoking or weight loss or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just doesn't come to me, and I don't go looking for it either.
Neither do I. Oh, so
Um,
make it a bit more vivid for us. So, how, where would a client be emotionally from the first session compared to the last? You don't have to go through the whole process, but what kind of feedback do you get on your sessions?
well, I'll never let someone leave without a big smile on their face for a
Hmm.
start, right? So, because when they're going through some stuff like this, it does. Like I had somebody here last weekend on Saturday, and my sessions are normally 90 minutes. I actually wouldn't leave for an hour afterwards because they just needed to settle back down. They
Wow.
had released so much in one single session.
Mm.
Um, so you get to see that they're changing. So say for instance, but they won't always recognize it. Like one of the ones that happened, I had somebody, she was studying psychology actually, which was really interesting, but she had dizziness and couldn't drive, but had a huge amount of anxiety and trauma in her life. And on her first session, her mother stayed in the room with her. I'm okay with that. Second session, the boyfriend dropped her and went off. Third session, she drove in and I said to her, "How are we doing?" So I don't know. And I said, "Who drove here today?" And she went, "Oh, I did." She came to me because she couldn't drive because she had
Mm.
dizzy spells, which was down to FND.
Yeah.
But she drove there that day. So they don't always realize it themselves.
Yeah.
Mainly they'll often hear it from others because the change is gradual. When you're working with people over 3 or 4 or 5 sessions, the change, they don't see it each and every week. And it's normally once a week that I work with them and the reason for that is that it gives them time to get back into their own environment.
Hmm.
Any issues that pop up, they're immediately dealt with the first time so that you're not allowing anything to grow. You're just literally keeping it clear and free as much as possible.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So you get to see major transformations. I literally see people lose years on their face right in front of me, and it's quite a joy to watch.
Mm.
Particularly when I do those last two, like the little star, the lighter stuff. It's really,
Yeah. No, it's so easy to forget how bad you were doing just a few weeks ago. I see that all the time as well. You know, the improvement that you get, you forget the old stuff, and that's the way it's supposed to be, isn't it? So you want to
absolutely
go forward
correct.
and back.
So it's actually really important that you log it at the start, like where
Mm.
is it now? And
Yep.
then if you need to remind them, you remind them.
Yeah, it's the same with tinnitus. You need to remind them that actually there was improvement just to make sure that they realize that the hypnotherapy is helping them.
Correct.
That's same thing.
Absolutely correct. Yeah. Um, yes. And then, I mean, sometimes you're also, particularly when people have deep trauma, they're suffering depression or whatever, there is the medical side effects that can extend sessions slightly longer as well,
Mm.
because the medication is already having an effect and it's kind of
Yeah,
not letting the emotions kick in, which is where when we need them.
that's right. Yeah. So, um, now
I
I'm
think
wondering,
I can't
yeah,
remember is there much left on it, to be honest with you now, but
on the
I'll
presentation.
very quickly go through. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because I know we're at 6 o'clock already. Um, the unconscious seeks safety. Yeah, so that was just a key message for the unconscious to understand.
Hmm.
You're seeking safety. Trauma once protected you, or sorry, once that you used it for protection, it may now be causing harm.
Hmm.
So letting go is a deeper act of protection.
Mm.
It's permission for the mind to change.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, then there's the emotional maintenance. So stress can re-trigger symptoms. Stress will keep it down. Um, Ongoing emotional maintenance is absolutely crucial. That's the same message for everybody. We all need that anyway.
Mm.
You
We do.
know,
Yeah.
uh, every single one of us. Um, and healing is resilience. It's not just recovery. So it's about building in the resilient tools that they'll have themselves to move forward. A lot of that is dealt with in whether it's control room, whether it's computers, whether it's whatever form you choose to use to install those new things as they go through. Um, yeah.
Hmm.
And a key message, again, it's the client that makes the change. I only have words. I literally only have words. I may be able to guide them through it. I may know exactly what I'm doing, but without their permission to change, without their unconscious agreement to change.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, every client carries the possibility of healing within them. And then the last thing I'll say is that anybody who's working with any kind of trauma, you need to have a structure of self-care for yourself because
It's heavy stuff sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah. It
yeah.
does.
And even though I don't necessarily know an awful lot because they are doing the processing internally without necessarily talking to me, I mean, their electromagnetic energy field is just carrying that stuff in it, and I'm in the same space, so I'm
Mm.
absorbing it,
Yeah.
and I know it. And that's not spiritual; that's scientific. So,
Yeah. And someone's
people thought
asking,
so.
yeah, what's your self-care practice after these kinds of cases? Yours.
I have a big tree out there that I kind of sit on. There's a bench there, and I literally sit there, and I'll go to the beach or do something. I live just not far from the beach, so I love being in nature. It's my way of addressing that.
Hmm.
It's my way of doing it, but it is important that it's done.
Wonderful.
It really is. So, yeah, I think that was it. That was just, sorry, I'll read that just in case people can't see it. People have, when they don't have a solution, this is one of the benefits of, one of the reasons why I feel so good about doing it. This lady, again, this was all done by Zoom because many people can't drive anyway. They just can't get to me.
Mm.
Um, Suffering with cognitive FND for a year, very debilitating, lapses of consciousness, got completely out of it.
Wow.
She had 5 sessions with me through Zoom, and she's based in the opposite end of the country and completely symptom free, and I've not had an episode in a very long time. I have 4 or 5 of those.
Wonderful.
I don't necessarily have so much on the trauma stuff because people in small towns don't want to tell the world they had trauma, so don't necessarily get those too clearly. But yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So that kind of is it. And I
Mhm.
am doing training in Dublin and in Belgium.
Right. Oh, both in June. Okay.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's
I'm in
online
Dublin
as
2 weeks
well.
now.
All right.
Yeah, and I'm in Belgium in the 28th and 29th, I think.
Hmm.
And that's me.
Wonderful. Okay, we will put all details into the Mind Explorations Facebook group and into the comment section on YouTube. That is going to happen tomorrow, the replay. Um, so, all right, do you want to close your presentation
Has anyone
this
got
evening?
questions?
And then we'll go into questions. If anybody has questions, put them into the chat. And I didn't warn you beforehand that we might go into gallery view, so I won't. We'll just stick here. Do we have anything else? Oh, there's more. Um, how do clients formulate what they want? Are they able to tell you, or are they able to formulate it?
What do you mean? What they want?
Or what's their goal, I guess? I mean, be
Well, their
symptom
goal is to
free.
be back. Normally, their goal is to be back to where they were. I mean, one of the questions, one of the initial conversations I'll always have with people is, what is it that they want?
Hmm.
Now, often I get told, well, I don't want this and I don't want that. And I go, yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
But what is it that you want?
Hmm.
So, and I use humor an awful lot. It just helps to break it down. But I'd often say things like, okay, so you don't want to be anxious. Do you want to be scared? No. Right. But they get the point.
Mm.
They get the
Yeah.
point. And they immediately turn it. And so it's focusing on what they want. In most cases, they will want to, the first step they want is to not feel the anxiety that comes with it. And they want to know that there is a hope. They want to know that they can be back walking or driving or not having seizures or getting on with their life as they used to.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then in the same time, they also get um, pretty much most of their emotional baggage that all of us carry, they get it cleared.
Hmm. Wonderful. So there's not a question, a comment. Great information, John. Many thanks. It's a hugely important area for hypnotherapy and hopefully for medical communities to learn that this can help many people with FND. I think it can, can't it?
It it it's something, I mean, obviously running a conference, one of the things that I'm interested in doing is getting hypnotherapy more out there anyway and more people to accept it. Working with something that there is no other solution for at
Mm.
this stage creates an even greater awareness and even greater acceptance within um, slowly, but within medical, there will be some acceptance of this, that it does help, because I've
Yeah,
had one or two referrals from doctors.
wonderful.
Um, it won't be general refer. You won't get it across the board, but it's just people who happen to have heard. But all of the word filters then, literally word filters.
Hmm.
Um, it's good for hypnotherapy, basically, if we as hypnotherapists can provide solutions. Because if you think about it, if any client that comes, so no matter what therapist you are, they don't really care about the, the actual therapy itself.
Mm.
What they care about is walking out with a
Solution.
solution to their
Yeah,
problem.
yeah,
And they'll go to the one that works the best or the one that works for them.
yeah.
And right now, there is nothing else that will work for functional neurological disorder.
Hmm. Yeah. There's lots of those diseases out there, isn't there? Or issues.
Yeah. And
Um,
tinnitus is the same. I mean,
yeah.
as you know, there's very little support outside of that. And if you're providing a solution that helps people, um, then that is good for the profession because it creates even greater awareness.
Mm.
As someone said to me recently, who is fairly knowledgeable, but not necessarily about therapies, said, "Oh, if I think of hypnotherapy, I think of it for smoking and weight loss." And I go,
Yeah.
Jesus, but we're so immersed in it, we forget that a lot of the public think of it like that.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Or stage hypnosis where people cluck like chickens. Yeah.
Absolutely. But even in the therapy context, that was her response was like, "No, it's smoking and weight loss." And I go, I haven't, I deal with them, but so freaking rare.
Mm.
But doctors here, and so much of this too is about educating the public. I mean, I think it was kind of really ironic. I had this person who was coming in for what was described as racing thoughts, and the doctor had recommended cognitive behavior therapy.
Hmm.
In 2 sessions, his racing thoughts were all finished. But basically, he was fine. But there was such a belief in the doctor. He turned around to me and said, "Well, do I need to do my CBT now?" And
Yes.
I just looked at him and went, "What do you do?" He said, "I'm a mechanic." And I said, "Okay. So if I brought my car to your garage and you fixed it, but another garage had said, I was recommended to go to another garage, after you fix it, do I need to go up to the other garage?
Mm.
No." Oh, well, then he kind of got to think, no, you don't need anything else.
Yeah.
But it just, there is such a belief in the medical community that, and I'm not slagging that. What I'm basically saying is that we have an education role to get people to understand the power of hypnotherapy and how it can help. And just because it's not recommended by medics, um, for whatever their reasons, and I don't even know what their reasons are, but
Well, if you don't know that it exists, or you don't know that the extent that it can have, then you won't recommend it because you just don't know.
correct.
Yeah, it doesn't.
And even like I was a client last month. She's a nurse, works in a doctor's surgery, and she just said, "John, the amount of kids," and it was her child I was working with, the amount of kids who are coming in with anxiety and they're being medicated,
Yeah.
but she's actually aware enough to bring the child because again, I got referred through someone else. Someone else had got they're sent on. Um, but it is about creating an awareness. Yeah, it really is about creating an awareness.
Definitely. Let's keep doing that then.
Yes. In
Um,
things like tinnitus and FND will that because the more people that can work with it, the more the medics and the general public get to see hypnotherapy is not just stage or smoking or weight
yeah.
loss.
That's also a relief on the healthcare systems. If you go through all you know, the MRIs and the neurologists and everything, you're taking up space. Well, that's a bit stupid to say, maybe taking up space, but it's like, here's a solution. There's hypnotherapy. do that first, and if that persists, then you can still go to the neurologist. Because as someone says, would I be right in assuming that everyone that comes to you has already explored everything medically first? They have.
Pretty much,
They've been on a long
except,
journey, and yeah.
yeah, there's a few that haven't because they've had somebody that they spoke to, like that lady last week,
Mm,
who has not yet got her diagnosis, and by the time she gets her diagnosis, she won't actually have that condition anymore.
yeah, yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? So,
You
um,
know, there's a few like that, but not many. It's mainly they've been through the ringer, and that's a frustration for them, pure frustration,
yeah,
which just adds to that anxiety, depression. It's part
yeah,
of it.
yeah. That will continue. I mean, it takes. I know somebody who's going for an MRI in August or September, and that's an early appointment. We're now in just in June. I heard that last week, so in May. I think that's quite a long time to wait for something, and then if they don't find anything, they send you to the next station. It's just yeah, a very long path for people. So if we
Yeah,
could solve
and
that, that would
I
be
mean
great.
that's probably quite good because I know if in Ireland you'd be waiting 6 to 9 months for an MRI, it's a long time if you're in the public health
Okay.
system. So it's like, yeah, Britain's
Yes.
probably the same.
Mm, that's yeah. Well, we are pretty quick, aren't we? And I'm in the
Yeah,
Netherlands for anybody who doesn't know. So, all
yeah.
right. Um,
Um,
mhm.
I was going to see was there any more questions?
Um, no, we're not going to talk about that last comment. We
Yeah, no, we
don't.
can't do that.
Nope.
Well, we could,
So
but
if you have any more questions, guys, either to John about the FND, about his approach or anything else, you can always get in touch with him. I will put all the contact links into the comments or the replay as well. And if you would like to train with John for FND, one training is on the weekend of the 6th, and the other one is on the 22nd.
14th and 15th,
14th.
and 28th, 29th.
Oh, 2 weeks, weekends after the other. No. Oh, no, those
No,
2 weeks.
there's a week in between.
Right. I mixed it up. Okay, I will put the dates into the replay as well, and then we won't mix it up. Oh God, I'm really good with dates, as you can tell. So
Absolutely good.
thanks a lot. Okay, thank you too for coming, everyone who's here live. And if you are watching on the replay, leave a comment. Let us know how you found it. And yeah, maybe see you on the course or next time when we have a session with the Mind Explorations group. If you're a therapist, if you're on Facebook as well, join the Mind Explorations group and you will get lots of these sessions live. And subscribe to my channel because that's where the replays go. So many thanks to you and have a lovely evening. Bye bye.